This is the part 2 of the video which I have made for the June 2020 paper 3.1. So this is the paper 3.1 and this is June 2020. Now, as we were going through, the last part was the graph, and I told you that the graph, this is the independent variable and this is always plotted on the x-axis. This is always the y-axis, which is the dependent variable. So when you plot a graph of the data, you have to understand is that you have to first of all label the axis. So whatever is written here, this is what you've got to understand, this goes on the x-axis, and whatever is written here on this, the whole story goes on the y-axis. So this will all go on the y-axis and this whole story here will go on the x-axis. So when you write down when you label the axis, the first thing you've got to do is that you've got to write down the whole thing, which is the x-axis has storage time in weeks. So you write storage time and you write the unit or whatever it's written in that, and on the x-axis, on the y-axis, you write percentage concentration of sucrose. And if you just wrote that percentage concentration of sucrose, and there should be no abbreviations, and if you didn't draw any graph, even then you get 1 mark. So x-axis storage time in weeks, percentage concentration of sucrose on the y-axis, and you got a mark for that. The next, so you got 1 mark for labeling the axis. The second mark is for the scale. Now you've got to understand how you're going to take the scale. Now it's very easy to take the scale if you have just understood a very important thing is that you have to look at what is the least here, 0 and 25. So on the x-axis, you've got to understand on the x-axis you've got to have 0 here, and you've got to have 0 here, and you've got to have somewhere sort of 25 at the end. And in this, of course, it was very easy. So on the x-axis, so every 5 weeks was 2 centimeters. So this was 5, this was 10, then this was 15, and this was 20, and then this, the last one, was 25. So as on the scale would be given by Cambridge, and we would check it. If we were checking your papers, we would check it. So 5 weeks, 5 was 2 centimeter. So we have this to be 2 centimeter, and that is of course given in the Cambridge mark scheme. Then on the y-axis you had 0.5, and that of course was also because, as you can see in on the table, the least is 0.5 and the most is 2.3. So 0.5 would be a very good way. So 1.0, then 1.5, and then 2.0, and then 2.5. And then of course you plot the graph. Plotting is of course very easy. Either you do a circle, a dot and a circle. So if you do a dot and a circle, that's fine, you do all of them. Or if you don't want to do a dot and a circle, then you can do a cross. And then you join each cross or each point with a ruler, point to point. So there were 4 marks for this, and I think nobody should lose these marks. Number 1 was for the labeling of the axis. Number 2 was for the correct scale. Number 3 was for the correct plotting. And number 4 was for joining it correctly. So whenever you join the points correctly, they must pass through the points. They must not go above it or below it, something like this. This would not be acceptable. So you must join it very carefully so that you do not lose any marks on that. The last part of the question, part 3, says describe the change in percentage concentration. Now if you look at the graph, there is a decrease over time. At 0 weeks it was 2.3, and then as the 3 weeks is 1.8, and then at 6 weeks is 1.3, and 12 weeks is 0.9, and 25 weeks is 0.5. So it is decreasing, but it's sort of leveling off, and there's a reduced gradient over time. Then we give some data support. Data support means that you give some figures from the table which is going to support this statement that you have made that decreases over time. So if you said at week 3 it was 1.8%, and then at 12 weeks it's 0.9%. You must give the units, you must give the x-axis and the y-axis. So that would get you another mark, and of course this was only for 2 marks. So out of these 1, 2, 3 points, you have to give me any 2. So you be careful, write more so that you're sure to get those 2 marks and you can get a good enough grade in the paper 3. And the last part of course then was on about state which sugars other than sucrose will be present in the honey after 25 weeks and explain your answer. Naturally, the sucrose will be broken down and that would be resulting in glucose and fructose. And the explanation was there's invertase in the honey which breaks down the sucrose. So this of course finishes your question 1 of the June 2020 paper 3-1.